Hello everybody, I'm Roadblock, and today's video is going to be a much requested video about Dark Fae. Now, Dark Fae is a very challenging boss. She challenged me for a really long time, was one of the more difficult bosses for me to get through, actually probably the most difficult boss for me to get through in the Doom Tower. But I think she's a lot easier now with the addition of Armanz. Now, spoiler alert for this video, it does revolve heavily around Armanz. So if you didn't get the fusion, this video might not be as much of a help, but I do still think it's going to help you understand the premise and kind of the ideas behind how to beat the Dark Fae. So I'm going to show you that here. I want to show you a couple of teams. So first, I'm going to show you, this is my main account that I just swapped to. And I'm going to show you the team on my main account real quick. Now, this team, it can do the highest difficulty of Dark Fae in hard. And it looks like a pretty stacked team, right? I mean, we've got Double Newt, Armanz, Lady Kimmy in the lead, and then Baron here, who is a Void Legendary Nuker, right? That doesn't really bode well for most accounts. But that's kind of why I wanted to show this to you, that this is just the, like, optimized high-end version of it, but you can do this at a lower end. So let me break down the pieces that we have in this team, and then I'm going to show you a different version of it that uses the same mechanics. So right away, we're going to start off with Lady Kimmy. So Lady Kimmy is there for her awesome speed aura in the Doom Tower, and then she brings turn meter control on her A1 and her A2, I think it is, where she steals enemy turn meter. Armanz, as we all know, is just a master turn meter manipulator. He takes turn meter on his A2, depleting the whole turn meter. Against Dark Fae, it'll only be 50%, but that's still a big chunk compared to some other champions. And then Newt, we have two A1s that decrease turn meter, and then of course Blessed Bash, which is his A3 that does enemy max HP damage. That makes this faster, but it's not necessary for the team. Baron is a nuker. That's the only reason he's here. He's a hard-hitting nuker, void affinity, so I don't have to worry about weak hits, and I could just clear out my copies that get taken by the Dark Fae. Now, if you haven't done Dark Fae, a brief rundown on her kit is that she will steal your team, and make copies of them on her team. When she does that, she copies them exactly. We're talking speeds, auras, everything. Their gear, everything. So you need to make sure that you can gain control as soon as that happens. What better way to do that than Armanz, who can decrease turn meter and stun the entire enemy team? That is why Armanz really makes this fight extremely easy. Furthermore, the strategy after you wipe the team is to maintain control of Dark Fae herself via turn meter manipulation abilities. Kind of like you would for Fire Knight, right? Once you break down Fire Knight's shield, you just want to turn meter control him nonstop so he never gets a turn and does damage to your team again. It's the same thing with Dark Fae. If we look at the team setup real quick, you'll see here, make sure one of the biggest flaws that you're going to run into is if you're not micromanaging the waves prior to round 3. If you're not careful, then you're not going to have the cooldowns you need at the beginning of the fight against Dark Fae. So you want to make sure that you're not using essential abilities throughout the fights. You'll see I don't use any of Lady Kimmy's turn meter manipulation. Why is that? I don't need her turn meter manipulation because I open with Armanz, and then I never use either of his abilities again. I lock the team down to start, and I let Baron put in the work. So you'll see that's the same opener for round 2 and round 3. Or sorry, for round 1 and round 2. And then on round 3, this is a priority. Again, not using Polymorph, because honestly it could just cause more harm than good. You really just want that turn meter control against the enemy team. For the Newts, which will be replaceable, and you're going to see that in the easier version of the team that I have on the free-to-play account, You'll see that in round 1, they're opening with Fury of the King, not using it in round 2, and, well, actually, they're allowed to use it in round 2, but they're not using Blessed Bash because I want to have that for the final fight. Now, one thing that I do with both of the newts is I open with the A1 because I want them to take control and make sure that any copies that made it through in round 1 don't get a turn. So, or if everyone is dead, then the newts will target the boss and begin the turn meter control right away, allowing for the other turn meter control champions to get their turns and manipulate that turn meter. And then we have Baron. So you'll see Baron is opening with Trample. If you don't know what Trample does, Baron hits really, really hard, and Trample, because he's kind of slow compared to the rest of my team, he's going to hit a target, and the extra surplus damage will probably kill the wave. On round 2, I'm just whittling down the wave with my newts because they're allowed to use Fury, or sorry. How do I kill? Oh, that's right. On this difficulty, because this is the highest difficulty, Wave 2 is all uncommon champions. They're going to die pretty quickly. You really don't... I open with Trample. On round 2, I just use Trample, and that's just going to do, because of the splash damage it does, that's just going to get through the wave. Round 3, I open with Sky Piercer, because I need to kill these legendaries. Sky Piercer is his biggest AoE nuke, and ignores 50% of the defense, so he pretty much kills everybody here in one shot. So that's the team. Now let's go ahead and do a run here, and you're going to see how it works. So again, here's a wave. This is a very scary looking wave. You've got 5 Void Legendaries, 4 Nukers, and a Siffy. So I get them low with the newts, and then Baron A1 kills them. We do use a Blessed Bash there. I should probably optimize that a little and say, hey, we don't need to use Blessed Bash there, but it is what it is. So now we come up to these uncommon champions. Everyone just kind of attacks them, but they're slow, they're weak. Baron will eventually come in here and get everybody with a trample once he gets a turn. He is slow, so keep that in mind. Baron is really slow. As far as replaceable nukers, you could use any nuker really here. A really good one, though, would be Filja, because she's a dwarf nuker that also brings turn meter manipulation. So if you really wanted to build a nuker specific to this content, she is a good option. Alright, so you'll see, I'm going to slow it down here. You see, we did turn meter manipulation on everybody. He follows it up with an A1, not his polymorph. If he polymorphed, they would come back unstunned and potentially get a turn against me. Now you see we opened there with the A1 out of the newts. We're just further manipulating turn meter to make sure that nobody gets unstunned and potentially gets a turn sooner. Baron does his job. This is where it's a little unoptimized. I could probably fix that so that he doesn't waste a Blessed Bash on a Baron. And then everything is on the boss. So you'll see that every ability that they use is either for the newts is the A1 or the A3. The A3 is just there to speed it up. But if I was having problems, I could just constantly turn meter the boss and only use the A1s. That is something that I would do if you used a replacement champion for this, like an Armiger or an Allure, who's only there to manipulate turn meter. Just have them cycle through their turn meter manipulating abilities. You're going to see that on my easier team that I'm going to show you here in a second. But we basically just go through and we try to keep this turn meter as low as possible. There comes a Blessed Bash. She does get a turn. That's okay. It's a legendary team. It's pretty tanky. You'll see on my other team where the speeds are more manageable, because I'm at a lower difficulty, that I'm able to just completely keep her turn meter controlled. Also, it's worth noting, my Armanz on my main account doesn't have any masteries or books, which is kind of funny. So if I did have those masteries, he'd be faster. He would also, and books on him, he would cycle through to that A2 much quicker and keep this turn meter way lower than it currently is. So it's not a fully optimized team yet, but it is 100% team, as you just saw. We're able to clear it. Now that is on the highest difficulty. If we move over to my free-to-play account, as you can see up here, this is now the free-to-play account. And we go into Doom Tower. I just unlocked Dark Fae today. You'll see I still have 9 keys left. Because I struggled on Bommel for a couple of days, I am down a key, so I have to start each night with the boss instead of ending each night with the boss. But this is Dark Fae. I do want to go over the significance of this Dark Fae. If you look at reward info, stage 40 Dark Fae on hard does give you the legendary crafting materials that you need to craft lethal gear. And I just want to show that to you guys. This is why Dark Fae is probably the most valuable boss to farm in Doom Tower, because she gives you the materials you need to craft 5 to 6 star lethal gear. Lethal gear ignores the same amount of defense as Savage. Sorry, I always get Savage and Cruel mixed up, and I have to think about it sometimes. It gives you the same amount of defense ignoring as Savage does, but gives you a free 10% crit rate with the 4-piece set. So that allows you to, first of all, hit that crit rate easier, and get better stats for your team, and because it's the exact same amount of defense ignoring. Where do we use this gear? PvP. Even PvE, if you're looking for a good nuker for wave clear, this is the type of gear that you want. But farming it is a challenge. It's not as easy as going into Fire Knight to get Savage and just doing it at whatever difficulty you can do it. You have to farm using your keys for Doom Tower, which you only get a finite amount. So Dark Fae is very important to farm on the rotation when you can. To make it more clear, I only have 1 week and 6 days to farm Dark Fae. So what is that? 13 days that I have to get as many silver keys worth as I can. Not exactly, breaking the, I can't just constantly farm it until I get the gear that I want, like Fire Knight. So you are limited in the gear you can get, but if you are going to farm her, it's best to farm her on this difficulty or the highest difficulty that you can achieve, so you can get those 5 to 6 star pieces. Now let's take a look at this team. This is my free-to-play team, right, as I've already said. So the concepts here are very similar. If we come in here and we look, we have Deacon Armstrong for a speed or a lead, just to try and get my team going a little bit faster. This team is likely too slow for the highest difficulty. I could fix that eventually. Right now, I'm just not in a position, I'm not worried about it, but it is fast enough for this difficulty, which I'm all about. Then we have Allure. Allure is taking place of one of the newts that you saw in my earlier team. And then Armanz, I've already explained what Armanz's job is and what he does. Then we have Newt in the role of a newt, but this could be any turn meter manipulator as well. You could bring Armiger, you could bring another Allure if you had it. Filja comes to mind, even a Geomancer. Actually, now, Geomancer isn't going to give you as much turn meter manipulation as Newt does, because it's on his A1 versus the A3 of Geomancer, but between Allure, if you can get her built quickly, fast enough, and Armanz, you can really just manipulate that turn meter so that Dark Fae never gets a turn, and then use Geomancer. But Geomancer is not going to do as much damage because the Dark Fae never gets a turn. It is an option, but you'd probably be better off using a Cold Heart. She's a little easier to obtain. Actually, probably easier to obtain a little bit more than even Geomancer is, where Cold Heart would decrease that turn meter with her A3 and do enemy max HP damage. So Cold Heart is a perfectly viable champion here. I wouldn't run 2 Cold Hearts. I would recommend, if you are running a Cold Heart, you have some type of champion that does turn meter manipulation on their A1. Armiger, Allure, Newt, something along those lines, just to make sure that she doesn't get a turn. Armanz helps that, but he can't do it all on his own because he has to cycle to his cooldown. Allure gives you that time, same with Newt. And then we have Yakarl here as our nuker. Again, I recommend avoid nuker. Nothing worse than getting a weak hit. You can manipulate that, of course. You can make sure, like if I used a, what would it be? Not force. If I used a spirit, no, so we've got spirit and magic, so what would I want to use? A magic affinity nuker. I would never get a weak hit here if I used a magic affinity nuker. So you can kind of pre-plan that a little bit, but be mindful of that because nothing worse than not killing the whole team and all of a sudden their Armanz is taking control of everything. The copy Armanz is taking control of everything. Again, for the turn order stuff here, we do have Allure can use whatever, it doesn't matter. Armanz opens with the A2, never does anything again for both rounds, other than his A1. Newt, I actually have him not using Fury of the King on round 1. I'll explain that in a second. I do have him opening with it on round 2, and then opening with it in round 3, because I'm a little nervous about Yakarl's nuking ability. You saw kind of that in the previous fight where my Newts took a turn before my nuker, right? And then Yakarl will use... That's why I don't use Fury of the King on round 1, because Yakarl's going to use the big nuke on round 1 and kill everybody. And then in round 2, if it's available, I will open with it, but not use it again to try and save it for round 3. I'm not sure why I'm opening with it and then not using it again in round 3. I think that was just a misclick when I set the team up, because I do kind of want to use that. Now, the good thing about Yakarl is he does bring some turn meter manipulation on his A2 when he gets to use it, as well as a decreased speed, which will help with us managing the turn meter. My previous team that you guys saw, my super team, I guess it does have decreased speed from Lady Kimmy. I forgot she has that for a second. And so that's the team. Again, I'm opening with Fury of the King just to help Yakarl do a little bit more damage. And everything else is the same. Deacon, all 3 rounds, open with this, use this. He has an extra turn mechanic, so his cooldowns come back very quickly. I'm not worried about that. This is a little bit of extra turn meter, but mostly he's there for the decreased defense and for the turn meter manipulation. I did make some changes. I'll save that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go here. Now, I did manual with this team first, and then I tested it fully, and it worked fine. This wave is much easier than the wave that you saw in the previous fight. And you'll see Yakarl didn't kill everybody, but because of how I have everyone controlled, they're not going to do anything else other than A1 here and just make sure that we get through this content. The great thing is the combination of Armanz and Yakarl will just completely crowd control these waves. You will see this one champion here, when he dies, he revives himself and does damage to my team. But we are tanky enough that that damage isn't really a concern. There it was. You'll see it maybe did 5% of our HP, and we kind of heal up just with blessings, or sorry, masteries, really. So just cycling through here, A1ing everybody down. It is a slow-running team, but what you could do is set this up for, 20 minutes, go have dinner or something, and then when you come back, it's all said and done. So Armanz stuns everybody, just like you saw. Having a little bit of trouble here. I'm wondering if I need to manipulate my cooldowns just a little bit better with Deacon, actually. But it still doesn't really matter. We eventually get the wave down. I would like to have my Yakarl be much stronger than what he is. I just finished getting masteries on him, so he's not completely geared to wipe a wave such as this. But it still works out. So that also shows you the wiggle room that you can have for your team, where as long as you're utilizing Armanz the right way, and he's built the right way, you really don't have to worry about anything. Now that the wave is gone, by the way, if you're wondering why they didn't try to turn meter manipulate Dark Fae, she is under a perfect veil. So we can't target her until the wave is cleared, which is actually kind of good. You really don't want to leave the wave alive, but now that we can target her, she won't get a team again. You'll see there's Newt doing all of his turn meter manipulation. Allure is only using her A1. That is it. At the end stage, Allure only uses her A1 and just consistently manipulates that turn meter. And we just do everything we can to keep the boss under control. Again, Newt speeds this up, but you could see it may take us 10 minutes, but as long as we manipulate the turn meter, she never gets a turn again, and we're good to go. Newt speeds it up right there with the big blessed bash, but really, it's not necessary. It helps, but it's not necessary. I don't recommend bringing in other enemy max HP nukers unless they have turn meter. Like, I wouldn't bring a Husk in here to try and fill Newt's role, because you're going to miss out on that turn meter manipulation. But something like Royal Guard, Cold Heart, those are viable because you can still manipulate turn meter with their other abilities, or their main abilities. So that's the team. I hope this helps you guys. This was a big part of what helped me with Dark Fae, was once I kind of realized the concepts of take control and then just turn meter manipulate the boss. Again, I did mention, like, actually, let's look at Filja, because I do have her, and I don't really, I like her. She's a great nuker. I should build her. She would be a much better nuker than my Kale, but I did go Yakarl for that route because of the Void Affinity and Legendary status. But if we look at her kit, on the A2, she has a 75% chance of fully depleting the target's turn meter. So much like Armanz, it's only going to do 50% because Dark Fae reduces turn meter reduction by 50%. But that's still going to give you time to cycle through the A1s of the other manipulators who can then keep that turn meter down as well. And then this here attacks all enemies, fills her turn meter by 15%, and heals her by 15% of the damage inflicted if this is critical. She also brings self buffs if she has 2 or fewer buffs. So she would give herself increased attack and increased crit damage. The A1 destroys max HP. We're not too worried about that. But she is really good here because she nukes while also depleting turn meter. Something that you get extra out of her, kind of like I was saying, I get extra out of my Yakarl, where I didn't get that out of Baron. So if I had a different nuker built, then there's options. Now, there are other champions that would completely fill this role. I'm not saying that she is the only champion or that the nukers I'm using are the only ones. I'm simply saying that those are the ones that come to mind based on my experience and ones that I've played with. But I hope that helps you guys. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any other questions about Dark Fae. I struggled with that fight for a very, very long time. I gotta tell you, I never thought I'd see the day when my free-to-play could do that fight. And now that I have Armanz, it's very trivial. It feels very trivial. In fact, I think this team, if the speeds could be manipulated right, if I could be fast enough, is actually probably better optimized than this particular team. Yes, I have 2 enemy max HP nukers, but Dark Fae got a couple turns against this team. And while she did against the other team, that's because I just don't have the damage output yet. Once I rebuild Yakarl the right way, that won't be a problem. One other note, and I'm sorry to keep delaying this outro, but I want to mention one other note about a nuker that you should not use is Sun Wukong. As I said, Sun Wukong may be your best nuker. He's my best nuker, and I want to use him on this fight. However, she copies them in their entirety, including their passive abilities, which means that if she copies Sun Wukong, he will continue to revive for the entirety of the fight. I do not recommend using Sun Wukong unless you have some way to mitigate this, or if you have a plan for handling it. Bring or build another nuker and and go that route. So, all right, I'm finally done. I hope this helped you guys. If you like my content, or if you have any questions, leave a comment and let me know. I will be happy to answer them. And if you like my content, please consider subscribing. That's really going to help out my channel right now. I'm just trying to grow and build this channel as much as I can and make more content like this. The more support that I have for the channel, the easier it is for me to dedicate time and come up with a very well scripted and practiced video, as opposed to many of my other videos where I'm this was one where I came in with a direction, I knew what I was going to say, and I hope this was a higher quality video for you guys. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.